afternoon. Welcome to Global Connections on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm Cheryl Crozier Garcia, and I'm sitting in today for Carlos Juarez, who is in Innsbruck, making global connections on the other side of the world. I'm joined today by Matthew Yetter. Matthew is a graduate student at Hawaii Pacific University. He is a joint major in Human Resource Management and Management Information Systems. He's also a former Marine who has served multiple tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq. So we're going to be talking to him about some of the global connections that he made while he was there. And if you would like to connect with us via Twitter, please do so. We're at ThinkTech Hawaii. The name is on your screen, and we will be able to see your tweets here in the studio so that we can answer any questions that you have. So Matthew, you, as a former Marine, you were socialized well, I would say, into the values that the Marine Corps have. And they train all Marines to adhere to those values in their behaviors while in uniform.
Yes.
So now that you have left the Marine Corps and are an employee, how important do you think it is that the values of the organization and the values of the employee match?
I think it's instrumental in ensuring that the employee-employer relationship is actually productive for each person involved. If your values don't align with what your company seeks and what your company sees as the future for itself, its product, or its service, then there's no way you're going to thrive, and in turn the company is going to suffer.
Mm-hmm. How important do you think it is that employees actually thrive on the job? I mean, wouldn't it be best to just take the job that pays the most and worry about your emotional health and your fun off the job?
I think that work should be fun. I believe that if you try and separate your fun from your work life and leave it after hours or on your weekends, I think you're just shortchanging yourself in the overall end. The best part of being in the Marine Corps is that everybody did feel not just a cultural or a value-based tie to their organization, but they felt a family tie. They felt that what they were a part of, what we were trying to produce, was something greater than themselves, and that makes it enjoyable. I find the same thing in the HPU family. Mm-hmm. Being an employee here as well as a grad student, I find that developing that family sense and hearing all the values across the board to everyone is really what not only draws people here, but keeps people here, mm-hmm. for both students and employees alike.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been with HPU far longer than I care to think about, 19 years. And I have to agree with you. I think it's a lot easier to work and to deal with the difficult issues that come up in the workplace when you're certain that your values and the organization's values mesh effectively. And I think it's easier to build relationships with people whose values agree with your own. Now let me ask you this, because you are a joint major, Human Resource Management and Information Systems. So in your work, in your HR classes, and I've already submitted your grades, so you don't have to worry about that, about what you say. But in working with your fellow HR students, they come from all over the world, what kinds of challenges have you experienced in developing that core set of common values so that you can work together effectively?
I think the biggest challenge, at least for myself, and I believe some of my fellow students, has been not so much finding the same value, because we all have the same focus, right? We all want to succeed. Everybody goes to school to succeed in one way or another, whether it's socially or in your grades. Everybody's here to succeed in one way or another. And I think that everybody has to focus on that when they try and build those trust-based required relationships, especially with all the group-based projects here. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be a challenge. I think personal values and personal ideals can sometimes clash and conflict, and you see that a lot especially from an international standpoint, especially for someone who maybe doesn't have the luxury of going through one of your global human resource management courses and learning that cultural connection across across the globe, and being able to see someone not from a personal point of view or a personal set of values, but try and understand where they've come from. And that can be hard to mesh, especially for someone who's been limited throughout their lives, or maybe even somewhat secluded to a global market or kind of a global experience. Coming from a very small town in a very small state in the Midwest, you don't get a lot of cultural change, I guess you could say, and everybody becomes kind of stagnated. So the military definitely helped me to build from that, but I've noticed that working with students maybe not with that similar background, with that evolved kind of collaborative effort across not just globally, but even just across state lines, can really create some complication and difficulty between those group dynamics.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you that students come to university, particularly to graduate school, with a common set of goals in mind. But I also think that there may be different ideas about the most efficacious way to accomplish those goals. Have you seen any differences in the way, say, work is approached, or the way socialization is approached among students from different countries or from different cultures, and how do you deal with those differences?
As far as work goes, I think that's pretty much similar across cultures, especially when you're talking about a generation of students. We all kind of come up in a similar fashion. I definitely see that depending on the part of the world that, let's say, group members that I've had, what their focus is on being done early or pushing it to that last minute procrastination, the way that they involve themselves in the group dynamic, or the kind of control they want to have. As far as the best way to achieve those goals as the total group, I think a lot of that has come down to personal preference, no matter the culture they've come from. It's really been what I've seen. I've spent multiple semesters here now and been lucky enough to meet and work with students from countries throughout the globe, and many times throughout different semesters with different students from the same location. And you see the same thing, I believe, that you would see from different students from throughout the U.S. Some people just want to buckle down and get the job done right off the bat, and some people would rather socialize and converse on it for a while and hopefully come up with the right decision in the end.
Yeah, Hawaii is an education destination as well as a recreation or visitor destination. You're from Oklahoma.
Yes, ma'am.
Not necessarily known as a big visitor destination.
Not a lot of tourists. No.
Yeah. So how do you balance the ability to spend time in what I will say is the most beautiful spot on earth, with the need to be a good employee, a good father, you have a son, a good student, and to merge all of those responsibilities in a way that doesn't neglect the opportunities to take advantage of everything that Hawaii has to offer?
A whole lot of caffeine. Definitely caffeine has become my friend. But really, it's just a matter of balance. And making sure that you set your priorities as not just you feel, but those important around you remind you that they are. And it's hard to maintain that balance at times. But definitely prioritization, and then ensuring that you give yourself some time too. I think that ends up getting forgotten, especially in the hustle of life, that stopping at least every now and again for yourself, whether that's just to socialize with friends or just to be alone, you need that. You got to recharge, even if it's just once a month. Find some time for yourself, but it can be done. And prioritization and setting goals on short term is definitely the best way to go.
So how do you recharge?
Generally, the gym, to be honest. I find exercise and physical activity is the best way for me to recenter myself, especially it's a great stress reliever. Burn off some of the caffeine.
Do you really take that much caffeine?
No,
Seriously?
ma'am, definitely not.
So how much is a lot?
I generally wake up with a Monster, use one during the day, but
Ooh.
I don't do coffee. That's the only thing.
Okay.
So
what's your favorite part of the graduate program at HPU?
Probably the sense of family, as we discussed before.
Uh-huh.
I've made some truly amazing friends in the last 3 semesters. I've been very blessed, as I'm sure every student at HPU is, that at least puts himself out there a little bit to socialize. I've actually made friends I have a good friend of mine from my first semester who lives in Münster, Germany, and we actually Skype at least once every 2 to 3 weeks now. Someone I never would have met otherwise had I not been a graduate student here and been put in a position to meet that individual, and it's turned into a very enriching and enjoyable friendship for me.
Oh, that's good. That's
So.
good. I'm an alum too.
Yes, ma'am. I
Yeah.
did know that.
Oh, you did know that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was a member of the first graduating class of MBAs in the early Jurassic period. And you're right about making friends from all over the world. When I graduated, I was one of 12 in the first graduating class, and there were 10 men, 2 women. The men came, I think there were 3 from China, 1 from HPD, a couple from the continental U.S. who were active duty military officers, and the women were myself and a woman from China. And I was walking down the street in London several years ago, and I heard somebody yell, and I turned to look, and it was one of my classmates from that class who had married another classmate, someone who had finished the year after we did, and he was from China, she was from Thailand. They were living in Luxembourg, working for British Petroleum, and they had come to London on business at the same time when I was there. So we literally met in Trafalgar Square, completely by accident. And I think those are the kinds of connections that people can make if they open themselves up to the opportunities for friendship, for communication, for fellowship in the various circumstances where they find themselves.
Definitely, and I know that HPU definitely provides us with multiple opportunities to do that. Personally, I'm actually a part of 2 separate organizations here at HPU, the Computer Club and the newly founded Rotary Club. And before realizing the opportunities available, I enrolled kind of at a late time when I started school here.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to allow yourself to become involved, to become something more than just a student, there's definitely a lot of opportunity for networking, if that's how you want to look at it, or just really strong friendship development here with HPU, and that's always on a global scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something to think about, and speaking of continuing to make those global connections, it's time for us to connect with the folks out there, so we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Don't leave. And again, if you're interested in reaching out to us via Twitter, you can do so at ThinkTech Hawaii. And we'll be happy to take your questions if you have any. We'll be right back.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Keith.
My name's Keith Bettinger.
I knew that.
And I'm the host of ThinkTech Asia.
I knew that, too.
Here on ThinkTech.
Fabulous. You got a great show going, Keith.
Thank you very much. And for our viewers out there that are interested in ThinkTech Asia, it airs every Tuesday from 4 to 4:45, and it can be accessed online at thinktech.com.
Yeah, so what kind of guests you like?
Well, we have a number of guests from academia, from practitioners of international affairs. Sometimes we have military officials. Sometimes we have public officials on the show. And our goal, we try to talk about current issues in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Central Asia, all throughout the Asian realm, in more depth than you would find in traditional
'Cause
mainstream
that's the
media.
difference, isn't it?
Exactly.
That you're reaching out beyond what ordinary news media would do.
Right.
And that's why we like you so much.
We're trying to provide a thinking person's perspective, an intelligent perspective on what's going on, and we're both sides of the story, or even when there's more than two sides, we try to cover every angle. And I think that that's one of the big benefits that we provide here at ThinkTech, is it's a really innovative source of educational programming for the people of Hawaii.
You're great, Keith. You are a great host. You got a great show going on. I watch it every week.
Thanks very much.
Why don't
yeah.
you guys watch it every week too, okay?
4:45 to 4 to 4:45 every Tuesday.
Welcome back to Global Connections at ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm Cheryl Crozier Garcia, filling in today for Carlos Juarez, who is in Innsbruck working on some research. And I'm joined this afternoon by Matthew Yetter, who's a graduate student at Hawaii Pacific University, studying a dual program in human resource management and information systems. Welcome back.
How you doing, Cheryl?
Pretty good.
Good.
So we were talking about how your Marine Corps experience taught you the ethics of the Marine Corps and how to really structure your work behaviors in a way that meshed with those values. Have you seen that happen in your experience as a student at HPU?
Well, like you said, the military, Marine Corps, I personally know, is really big on ethics and discipline and ensuring that not just rules are followed, but rules are followed correctly, and even when people aren't around, integrity being a big part of that. Of course, in every student organization, any higher ed, you're going to have your requirements of ethics. Obviously, no fraternization with your staff above you, plagiarism, things like that are always laid out. But I think that what's forgotten possibly by many students at times, but seems to be heavily instilled in the HPU culture, is maintaining an ethical level of behavior with your fellow student. Remembering that your educational and learning requirements or your interactions with staff or professorship isn't the only thing limiting where your ethical behavior must be drawn. Ensuring that your sensitivities to your fellow students, especially in a university with a large global pool, that's really important. And I think in the military a lot of time that's forgotten, and I've had to kind of relearn that a little bit here at HPU, which is something I'm obviously always going to be grateful for, especially leading into a civilian career now. But as far as ethics is concerned in business, I've heard that you're actually doing some research regarding that. So is there any way you could maybe give me a little more explanation on what you're working on?
Oh, sure. My research interest has always been ethics in the workplace. In fact, I wrote my dissertation many, many years ago now on secular application of the rule of St. Benedict, looking at 5th century monastic values and the ways in which those might be operationalized in modern organizations. And since then, I've presented a number of papers all around the world on this very issue. Currently, I'm working on a study that is an attempt to teach HPU's corporate values of aloha, pono, and kuleana to students in the graduate program. And so the study has 3 phases. The first phase is actually writing the proposal for the study and then setting up learning activities that students can do in the classroom. The second phase is then implementing those learning activities in the classroom. And phase 3 is gathering data to support or figure out the degree to which those values have become part of the students' ongoing work behaviors, the degree to which they understand what aloha, pono, and kuleana mean, and the degree to which they feel themselves able to operationalize those values in their work behaviors. So this summer, I'm heading out to the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University in Minnesota. They have one of the largest collections of secondary sources on the issue of ethics and values in the workplace. And so I'm going to bury myself in their libraries for 6 weeks to finish up writing this study. And then I'll come back and you'll get to see some of those impacts in the classroom.
Outstanding. I actually look forward to that. You spoke about that a little bit actually this past semester, I remember, in our class. I realized, at the time, we really truly were discussing the impact directly in the university as a student on education. I'm curious, how do you plan to instill in the student to take that further after graduation? I know myself had many questions in class, but how do we take those 3 values that we are so strongly adhered with here and positively take that forward, especially once we depart Hawaii, for many of us, into that corporate workforce?
Right. Well, one of the assumptions in my study is that the values, although defined in culturally appropriate Hawaiian ways, are universal to most cultures. Friendliness, responsibility, accountability, justice, these things are common in all cultures. They manifest themselves differently, perhaps.
Definitely.
But they're common to all cultures. And so it has to come down to, first of all, students being able to spot those values in their own individual behaviors. Secondly, being able to spot those values in the behaviors of the people they come in contact with. And then being able to say, all right, in a new situation, a place I've never been before, with people I've never worked with before, how do I behave in ways that manifest that aloha, pono, and kuleana are important to me? If you can do that, I believe that you can be successful across all cultures. I mean, people come to Hawaii, and the one thing they say when they leave is, oh, the people were so friendly. They were so nice. They took time to talk to me and to tell me about their lives and to learn about my life. People say that when they come here on vacation. It's one of the things that the visitor industry has marketed since the visitor industry started. So I believe that these are values that can enrich any organization and can help any professional be successful.
Terrific. I look forward to learning more about it next semester.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Plenty of work in that regard.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Not sure where to go.
So Matthew, tell me, because you did the exercises, the first set of exercises in class, what did you think was difficult about them, and what did you think was easy?
Honestly, I think, like just about anything, the hardest thing was self-assessment. Trying to decide where it fits in anything organizational or even culturally, you can look at so objectively. You can look at it from the outside in. But trying to self-reflect and see how it impacts yourself and how you adhere to those guidelines, those values, or ethics, I think is the hardest part, because a lot of times people, when they really want to look inside, are going to find something maybe they don't like, and that's hard to admit, especially in a classroom, despite the level of trust built into most of the classes I've been in here. So I think that was always going to be the hardest part, and was probably the most enriching and educational for me.
So take what you learned and think about sort of current events that are happening right now. Are there any events that have been in the news media, say in the last couple of weeks, that give you pause to think about how those values and ethics might be applied effectively, or where they're not being applied?
Well, let me think. Unfortunately, I'm not completely up and fully current on all the news sources right now. I pretty much get my news from the internet when I get the chance, or class.
Okay, so what's trending?
Well, of course, you've got the Bruce Caitlin issue going on right now as far as transgenders and his choice, or her choice, to make that transition and to be open and upfront about it with everybody. I think the response from the community, society as a whole, has been fairly positive regarding that. And there's obviously a lot of conversation around it. I'm not sure how that necessarily fits into the business ethics side of the conversation, but I would say maybe globally, there's definitely an impact, because society globally has responded, and him once being a Olympic athlete has obviously made him an international figure. And
Right.
I think the response from around the world has definitely been one of positive backing. At a
Sure.
minimum.
I think that the Caitlyn Jenner reveal and the response to it has been very positive, and in some ways you could say very welcoming. And if it is indeed welcoming, then we might make the argument that there is aloha towards Caitlyn Jenner. But from a business perspective, I think when we look at the response, I think we see some areas for improvement. Okay, I'll give you an example. While the response has been favorable to Caitlyn's coming out to the pictures in Vanity Fair, etc., notice that people are not talking about Caitlyn's athletic prowess or intelligence, business savvy, or any of those other things that make a person who he or she is and successful, but rather they are focusing exclusively on physical attributes and physical appearance.
I definitely have to agree with you there. I don't think I've heard anything regarding the person that is behind the current, as I hate to say it, facade of what it is. I realize that was a personal choice, but I think trying to equate it with the extent of bravery, maybe courage and all that is almost demeaning of the person. I think she stayed true to herself, and I think that's what we should be discussing. I think she will be talking about the right to personal choice, the right to be who you are, and I think trying to downplay it into the somewhat physical is really all it's become, and that has become a high point of conversation, especially across social media and all the different outlets available to anyone who wants to speak up.
Yeah. The sad thing is, though, I think that what Caitlyn is experiencing and the social media comments about her journey, sadly, is common to what women experience all the time, every day. So on the one hand, it's good because Caitlyn is already being treated like a woman. On the other hand, it's bad because women's intelligence, talent, ambition, etc., are often taken secondary to her physical appearance and her beauty.
Yeah, I would definitely have to say so, and don't forget to add strength. I
Yes.
think that's generally forgetting that there's a lot of strength in women. I know personally with a military background, something that you have heard about a lot in the last few months is, of course, women moving into more combat-related or frontline type jobs. And I think the same thing kind of happened, though. A lot of people looked past the actual depth of the issue and started looking at the simplicity of it, which is all those just front features. And the response was just about as outlandish and off point as a lot of the stuff for Caitlyn.
Yeah. Do you think that there are any other sort of trending issues in internet? You mentioned you don't have a TV.
I do
which
not.
astounds me that a member of the millennial generation would not have a TV. Why don't you have a TV?
Well, one, I don't have time to watch it, so what's the point in spending money on it?
Well, that doesn't
And
stop
then-
anybody from buying things.
Well, I try and be a little more logical with my purchase line
Okay.
than that. But basically because I want to be outside. I want to enjoy the beautiful location that we have here in Hawaii. And if I have a free moment, I don't even want the temptation of having to turn the TV on. Now I'm forced to go outside or do a puzzle with my son or something like that. Stay active. That, like I said, I'm a father, and I don't feel that sitting in front of the boob tube, as we like to call it, is really the best way for him to spend his time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of taking breaks, we're going to take one right now. So don't leave, but get up and stretch if you need to. We will be back with Global Connections on ThinkTech Hawaii in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevelin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday.
Okay, I'm Jay Fidel, that's Ray Starling. We co-host a show called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's really interesting. You know, Ray has a way of unzipping these guys. He asks them these questions and all this stuff tumbles out, and we find out stuff we would never know about without Ray's questions. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, Jay. I'm very pleased to be your Ed McMahon every Wednesday at 4 o'clock here on the internet. So you can join us and see what's happening in the energy world, and there is a lot going on. So join us every Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, come around, be energized, right here on ThinkTech. Aloha.
Hi, welcome back to Global Connections at ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm Cheryl Crozier Garcia, standing in for Carlos Juarez, and with me this afternoon is Matthew Yetter. You know, before the break, Matthew, we were talking about getting outside and taking advantage of the beautiful weather here in Hawaii. So what kinds of things do you do when you're outside, particularly with your son?
Well, of course, I like to take advantage of the Hawaiian terrain. So a lot of hiking, hit the water as much as we possibly can. My son's only 5, but he's actually quite the bodyboarder already, and swims like a fish. And of course, sports. There's a lot of opportunity, especially with a 5-year-old boy, to get outside and play baseball, football, or even soccer. So it's definitely the best way to spend the time. But actually, regarding soccer, I was curious if, with the new, talking about ethics, with all the stuff going on currently with FIFA in the 2022 World Cup, what your insights were on some of the issues surrounding the ethical behavior within that.
Well, here's the thing that I think tends to be true in any human system. Whenever there is a lack of external accountability, or the perceived lack of external accountability, coupled with the ability to make lots and lots of money, or the perception that you can make lots and lots of money, I think that's an open door for corruption. We don't only see it in sports. We've seen it in governmental systems. We've seen it in corporations, for-profit organizations and non-profit organizations. And now we're seeing it in FIFA. I think it's the same situation wherein you have a person or people who aspire to acquire wealth and choose to do so without considering the short and long-term ramifications and the people that they might end up hurting as a result. So the FIFA scandal right now is disappointing. But there's another issue within FIFA that personally, as an HR professional, I find even more distressing that I did not know about. And that is the FIFA regulation that says that all athletes are subject to sex and gender testing, but that rule has never been applied to men, and they're not clear about how that testing should be performed. Originally, the rule was developed because there was a fear that men would disguise themselves as women and play on the women's teams, and therefore give that team an unfair advantage. However, there's never been a case of such a thing even being suggested. And it seems to be used, this testing requirement seems to be used as a way to identify or perhaps to penalize women who do not conform to the accepted standards of feminine beauty or feminine build or womanly behavior. And so there have been a number of different kinds of testing that they've done and they've talked about, things like chromosome tests, things like actual physical, visual examination of the athlete's body. And these things are just demeaning to female athletes and completely unnecessary because, as I say, first of all, it's very difficult to prove using any of these tests whether someone is male or female. And secondly, it is only those people who have identified as female that are being subject to these tests.
Interesting. That seems unethical in and of itself then.
Yes, and more, I think there's a moral issue that comes out of it too. Ethics and morals are not always the same thing. And I think what we're seeing here is really an attempt to demean those women athletes who, by virtue of their performance, may be viewed as not feminine, as not sort of real girls. And that is, I can't imagine a situation or a culture in which that would be considered appropriate, and yet it is in FIFA.
That seems interesting because I would like to see them try and imply the same style rules in anything below the collegiate level to see what the parental outlash would be for something like that.
Yeah.
Yet we're allowing it in an adult and global, enterprise. Really, in all honesty, FIFA's grown to be.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money to be made globally across all currencies. It's interesting too, to me, that the countries in which there is strong support and strong followings for soccer are not the countries that are getting involved with the FIFA investigation. It's the FBI that is really beginning to take the point. And the U.S. does not have a big soccer culture compared to other places in the world. And so why is it that the FBI is willing to take on this investigation, whereas the law enforcement agencies of other countries are not? Could it be because the U.S., the FBI perhaps, and soccer culture in the U.S. has little to gain by doing this investigation, whereas other countries have a lot to lose by taking the point on these investigations? It's an interesting thing. It just goes to show, I think, that the love of money is universal across cultures.
I think that's definitely true. I've seen that, at least myself, especially over in country being Iraq or Afghanistan, that there was a lot more that could be done with a wad of $100 bills than any kind of negotiation or contract that you could devise. And I don't know how that fits into other cultures, but money makes change.
Yeah,
So,
money makes change.
it does, unfortunately.
Well, we see that in all cultures, and we see it across what might be considered service fees in one culture that may be called bribes in another culture. I think it's an area wherein U.S. domiciled businesses are at a disadvantage relative to other corporations throughout the world, because our federal laws say specifically that U.S. businesses are not supposed to take or give bribes. And yet these kinds of exchanges of value are considered entirely appropriate in other countries.
Do you think that the United States is actually maybe probably limiting themselves, or maybe even limiting their economic stance by maintaining such a hard baseline as far as bribery, or any other name you want to give it, as being illegal and unallowed?
I think the CEOs of the for-profit organizations that do business across geopolitical boundaries would say absolutely their hands are tied in some ways. I think we as a nation need to look at the degree to which we think it's reasonable that other cultures or our fellow citizens doing business in other cultures should be compelled to follow our rules, as opposed to following the rules of the areas in which they're doing business. I mean, lawyers argue the question of extraterritoriality all the time, whether it should be or should not be in a particular circumstance. That is an issue I think we as business people need to discuss.
Now, discussing that as far as the broken lines between the different countries regarding this type of a topic, what would be the best way, maybe from your research or just as with your 19 years, that someone who wanted to be involved in creating change or looking towards making change in something like that, what would be the best way to become involved in something along those lines, would you say? Especially as, let's say, a student in HR, or the best way to prepare themselves for that later?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is read a lot and study a lot. Because you need to understand the issues and how those issues are interpreted across cultures and across geopolitical boundaries. Okay? You need to understand the cultures that you're going to be working in and their views of what is right, what is wrong, what is proper, improper, etc. The other thing you need to investigate for yourself as a person is to do some discernment to determine what are your hard and fast rules for what is right and what is wrong. What boundaries are fluid for yourself and your own behavior, and what boundaries do you refuse to cross under any circumstances? So from an individual level, I think that's important. Working as part of a community, I'd say, get involved with the business organizations in town, the professional organizations, and the degree to which you can influence lobbying that those organizations take part in. And almost every professional organization has lobbyists, either here in Hawaii locally or at the national level, but get involved in those conversations with the professional organizations to establish what their lobbyists should be talking to our lawmakers about. You'd be amazed at the ear that a couple of passionate students will get. Remember that a lot of social change in the United States in the last 50 years started on university campuses with groups of students saying, no more of this. We want a different world. And we've got the time and the energy to think about it. You know, don't wait till you're 35 and you've got bills to pay and kids to raise and a job that you've got to hold down so that you don't have the time or can't take the risk of becoming involved in social change and social justice. Get involved when you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain by making a positive change in the world.
Perfect. I look forward to making more change next semester then.
So what kind of change do you want to make?
Actually, like I said, and as we've discussed, my background is military. Did 11 years in the United States Marine Corps, and I've become rather endeared with it. Mm-hmm. A big part of that, though, is becoming endeared to your fellow military members, your fellow Marines. And I think that the biggest and most challenging part of military career is leaving it. And I found that to be very true for myself and several individuals that I've met. And I think many people end up lost to the wayside. So actually, some of the change I'm hoping to create and utilizing Computer Club, Rotary Club commitment is to try and stand up a charitable casino night come spring semester, actually, hopefully in working with a couple other departments here within HPU and a nonprofit organization on the Windward side to try and raise money for homeless veterans within Oahu and the development of more centralized and focused homeless living on the Windward side, which as of now has very limited to almost no homeless shelters or protective agencies, and assist them in not just having a place to stay, but moving beyond their past and hopefully finding a better and stronger future that benefits them and the community as a whole.
Well, that's a very laudable goal, and I wish you well with that. I'm good for a roll of quarters at the slot machine. Yeah. So thank you for joining us, Matthew.
Thank you for having me.
It's been great talking to you, but it's time for us to go. So on behalf of Carlos Juarez, your host, I'm Cheryl Crozier Garcia saying thank you for joining us at Global Connections at ThinkTech Hawaii. See you soon.